Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
I want to tell you about my own story about being tortured in federal prison in the United States.
Roger Ver, unfortunately today he got arrested.
Free Roger.
Free Roger.
The real reason that I actually went to prison is because I was busy saying things like the things that I'm going to say in this video. Taxation is theft and war is mass murder, funded by theft.
Roger, Bitcoin Jesus himself was a true pioneer.
Here you've got one of the most independent people in the world preaching and teaching people to individually empower themselves around the globe.
He's been very supportive of the work we do.
He's also an inspiration to a lot of people around the globe.
I couldn't express any more of how great of a person he was.
In 2014, Roger Ver left the United States. America apparently is the land of the free. You should be free to just leave.
The United States government considers you to be their property.
Roger paid millions of dollars to the United States government, and they're saying now that it's not enough.
You read the quotes from his lawyer, it's like, this is the evidence of someone trying to comply with the law.
He did everything according to the book.
Nobody's ever gone to jail for that, ever.
The DOJ is actually using the Bitcoin Jesus term. They're literally going to crucify Bitcoin Jesus.
Just because some people get together and write down words on a piece of paper and call it a law, that doesn't alter morality one bit.
They're using the Trump case as a template for how they can go after any dissident.
This is very scary, frankly, 10 years later.
Government and central banks do not want this story out there.
The truth doesn't bend to whether or not we like it being the truth or not.
Roger's a good guy, and we all owe him a lot. It's really sad.
To say that he is instrumental in Bitcoin would be a radical understatement.
He's really believed in Bitcoin for the reasons that people should believe in Bitcoin.
It disgusts me from my core when I see government murdering people around the world. And Bitcoin has the power to undermine everything they're doing to people around the world.
Is it a coincidence? The only guy that's ever been criminally prosecuted on an exit tax interpretation is the guy that was exposing the intelligence community's attempts to infiltrate the Bitcoin movement?
There's nothing we can do to change the past, but we can work together to change the future.
From this moment forward, I'm on the same side as Roger.
Free Roger.
Free Roger.
Free Roger.
It's as crazy a case as you can possibly imagine.
The war on equal protection under the law. Mr. President, you got to pardon Roger Ver. Welcome to War Monday here on the Rob Maness Show. And we're live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, and Truth Social, folks. So go over there and follow me and at Worldview Tube on Truth Social. Well, lawfare and piercing the attorney-client privilege has become commonplace in our weaponized federal government and court system since they decided to go after Donald J. Trump and any American that stands up to the regime. They are at war with equal protection, and presidential pardons for people like Roger Ver are the best tool to address the immediate need for true justice. Here's Brett Weinstein on X about Roger. Roger Ver, known as Bitcoin Jesus, faces extradition to the U.S. and a sentence of up to 109 years if he's convicted. His crime? He didn't commit one. But that doesn't matter in the age of American lawfare. What Roger did do was promote a revolutionary, decentralizing technology that radically empowers citizens and disempowers central banks and governments. His advocacy enraged the regime in the same way that Julian Assange's journalism did. And the regime responded with the same diabolical toolkit. Roger Ver deserves a pardon to end his legal nightmare, and we citizens of the West need him to get that pardon to return us to the principle of equal protection under the law, close quote. Well, Brownstone fellow Aaron Day recently wrote an article explaining why Roger should get a presidential pardon. It was published on the Stone Zone of our friend Roger Stone, his website. And Aaron's my guest today. Aaron's an experienced entrepreneur, investor, and advisor with a diverse background spanning nearly 3 decades in sectors like e-commerce, healthcare, blockchain, AI, and clean technology. His political activism ignited in 2008 after his healthcare business suffered due to government regulations. Day has since been deeply involved in various political and nonprofit organizations advocating for freedom and individual liberty. Aaron, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Thank you for having me on.
Hey, I appreciate your time, my friend. I really didn't know until a friend of mine reached out to me that Mr. Vera was going through this really challenging time in his life. And immediately when I was asked, will you support a pardon for this man, I saw the linkage between Julian Assange's situation and Mr. Vera's situation. And I said, of course, without even having to think about it. And I don't know Mr. Vera, but I've read a lot about him and admire what he's doing. And you wrote a great article. I want to go through that article and step through it here real quick. But first, can you talk to us about the Brownstone Institute and your role there and what it does?
Sure. The Brownstone Institute is an organization that was formed in 2020 in reaction to the government shutdowns and the government mandates. It was actually started by Jeffrey Tucker, who has been involved with a number of pro-liberty think tanks through the years. And he saw that when the mandates and the lockdowns started, all of the Beltway libertarian organizations were on the wrong side and basically abandoned all of their core principles and all of a sudden became pro-lockdown and pro-mandate. And so he started Brownstone as a sanctuary for people who had spoken out, had spoken the truth, and basically were fired and otherwise retaliated against for standing up to the regime. And so the Brownstone Institute is focused on a number of areas. In addition to mandates and lockdowns and pandemic planning, we're also focusing on central bank digital currencies, which is where I come in. I've been focusing on CBDCs for the last 2 years when I realized through a long chain of events that CBDCs are the single biggest threat to human liberty. CBDCs are central bank digital currencies, which is basically a digital form of the dollar that can be programmed, tracked, and censored, and ultimately tied to social credit scores. So in essence, once CBDCs are fully put in place, it's essentially the loss of free will. And so once I understood how serious this was, I basically dropped everything that I was doing, wrote a book, even ran for president, and have been doing everything that I can to go around the country and now around the world, warning everybody about the CBDC threat. So those are some of the areas that Brownstone focuses on and what I focus on in particular.
Well, we're birds of a feather then. I'm a member of a task force called the Stop Vaccine Passports Task Force, the digital Vax passport that was trying to be implemented because it was linked to the Chinese social credit system and their style of oppression of freedom and those kind of things. So we're on the same page, my friend. But Roger's story isn't all about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. I know he's known as the Bitcoin Jesus, but it's much deeper than just that issue, right?
It is. Roger is very focused on libertarianism, or maybe even what you might call voluntarism, with a focus on people being able to engage in voluntary interactions. And so his interest in crypto is that he sees central banks as spreading tyranny all over the globe. In terms of the military-industrial complex and all of our wars are basically fueled by central banks. And central banks basically harm people all, within the country as well, in terms of manipulating the currency, putting the money out of thin air, manipulating interest rates, and basically creating a Hunger Games situation where people are fighting over a limited supply of money and then ultimately defaulting, and then the banks end up owning physical assets. And so he saw Bitcoin early on as a way to fix that problem. And so that's just one aspect of his philosophy. So he hasn't just been he wasn't just the first investor and retailer to take Bitcoin. He was the first investor really in the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem. If you look at his website at rogerveer.com, he's invested in over 40 different companies. And that's just what you see on that website. I mean, he's invested in cryptocurrency exchanges. He's invested in multiple different cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is just one of them. XRP is another. He was the co-founder and first investor in XRP. That's the third largest cryptocurrency by market cap. His entire focus has been to find digital cash that can be used by anyone, anywhere in the world, separate from government control and central bank control. So that's a big piece of this. But he's also funded anti-war efforts. He was the largest contributor to Ross Ulbricht's legal campaign. He supported Julian Assange. And as I found, just trying to raise awareness about his situation. I mean, he's been helping individuals behind the scenes all over the world who have been attacked for, speaking out and for speaking the truth and standing up to the status quo. So he's very, very ideological and probably the most consistently ideological person I've ever met promoting voluntarism.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive when I look at what he's done and where he's been, and this lawfare that's being practiced against him right now. It's not the first time that the government has been weaponized against this guy, right? I mean, you write about it in the article that he actually had to go to federal prison over something nutty like selling fireworks.
Yeah, he was running for office. He was from Silicon Valley, and he was running for political office as a libertarian. And in the debates, he spoke out against the ATF, in particular because of the ATF's atrocious behavior during Waco. And so he just so happened to also be in the business of selling fireworks on eBay. And so he was the only person in the world arrested for selling a particular type of firework, even though major mail order companies like Cabela's and others sold the exact same firework. He was specifically targeted. He was specifically singled out, and he spent 10 years in federal prison. And while in federal prison, he was basically psychologically tortured. It was a horrendous experience, and it was all for speaking his political beliefs.
And exercising freedom, right? I mean, that's it's crazy. What kind of torture did they put him under?
It was psychological torture. Basically, one of the prison guards, planted a shiv on him and basically, played a joke, like threatening that he was going to end up having to spend an extra couple of years in prison. And then at the last minute said, I'm just kidding. But in the meantime, absolutely terrorizing Roger, thinking that he was set up and that he would have to spend even more additional years in prison. And so needless to say, it was not a very positive experience for him, nor would it be for anyone.
Yeah, but I think it says something about his courage that he continues to step out and live by his beliefs and actually try to live what he preaches and the principles that he says he espouses. And that's to try to do the right thing, always follow the law, and act like a free man, in a free society.
That's absolutely what he's done, and he's done it very consistently. And so he got involved in Bitcoin early on. He hates the name Bitcoin Jesus, but he earned the name because he was so successful at evangelizing Bitcoin. I mean, literally, I found out about Bitcoin from him in 2012 at a Free State Project event in New Hampshire. Most of the people that I know actually learned about Bitcoin from Roger. And so he was signing up merchants and businesses across the world, not even just in the United States. He was traveling all over the globe, teaching people about this new technology, specifically with the focus of it being used as cash, something for retail transactions. And he stuck with his principles to the point where Bitcoin was hijacked around the 2015 time period by folks with ties to the intelligence community and ties to traditional finance. And all of a sudden, the narrative started to change. Well, it's not digital cash that you're supposed to use to buy a cup of coffee or use for day-to-day commerce. It's now digital gold. It's something that's slow and expensive, and it's not something that's for everyone. And now it's an asset class that you buy through BlackRock and you buy through Fidelity. And he was there when that process took place, and he decided to speak out about it. He certainly could have held his Bitcoin. It was completely against his financial interest to speak out about this. But once again, his drive has been for the freedom that can happen when people all over the world have access to digital cash. And so he wrote this book, Hijacking Bitcoin, that exposed it all. And it apparently made people angry because, and I actually had the opportunity of interviewing him right after the book came out. And then 3 weeks later, he finds himself arrested in Spain and thrown into the same prison where his friend John McAfee ultimately died after fighting extradition for 8 months.
Wow. Well, we got to take a break, Aaron. When we come back, though, I want to dive a bit more into the intelligence agencies. Oh, my gosh. And talk about this lawfare and how it's very similar, eerily similar to what we've seen done to Donald J. Trump over the last 4 years. We'll be right back with Aaron Day talking about how the need to pardon Roger Ver is imperative to freedom going forward all around the world, not just in America.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
But to break it down really quickly, when you exit the country and you exit, you give up your citizenship, you have to do something called a constructive hypothetical sale, which is that you pretend you sell everything you own in one day, the day before you leave. And the reality was that Roger owned such a huge percentage of the Bitcoins in the world at that time that if he had tried to sell them, the trading volume was, I think, $10 million. And so anything you sold over $10 million was utterly worthless. And so if the government's rule is if you sold everything in one day, how much would it be worth? The answer is anything over the global market cap for that, for that asset is worth nothing. If everybody in the entire U.S. decided to sell their house tomorrow, would you get Zillow value? I think all of us know the answer to that question. So they essentially want Zillow value for everybody's home if everybody sold on the same day. That's what they're asking for out of Roger. So it makes no sense. But what it came down to is that Roger consulted the best tax accountants, the best lawyers in the entire country, hired the best possible team, and he told them, look, I know the IRS doesn't like me. I know I'm going to be audited. I know they will attempt to come after me. I need you to do this perfectly. I need there to be no mistakes. I need every T crossed. I need every I dotted. And that's all in the emails that he sent to the accountant. So we know that he wanted perfect compliance. And how do we know that? We know that because in 2017, they raided his attorney's office. Armed federal agents raided his attorneys, interrogated his attorneys, seized reams of documents from his attorneys and attempted to use them against Roger. And this should terrify every American because they're attempting to destroy attorney-client privilege using this case. If what you say to your attorney is no longer private, what chance do you have? What chance do I have? So this case is should be horrifying to every American because it's about destroying your attorney-client privilege, and it's about destroying your right to rely on your accountant, your right to rely on your attorney when it comes to the U.S. tax code, that's 70,000 pages of which none of us can possibly memorize. And so if they do this to Roger, they're coming for the rest of us next. It's terrifying. But yes, the president can unilaterally decide to pardon Roger. The incoming DOJ could decide to drop the charges. And we fervently hope that one of those two things will happen because this lawfare needs to end. The incoming government needs to say, we've been the victims of lawfare. We need to look at everyone else who's been a victim of lawfare, and this needs to stop. Otherwise, our country has no chance. We as Americans have no shot unless this stops, and it stops now.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're talking about the declared war on equal treatment under the law, the lawfare that's been applied to Donald J. Trump, the lawfare that's being applied to Roger Ver, known as the Bitcoin Jesus, with Aaron Day, a Brownstone Institute fellow and author of this great article that was published on the Stone Zone, amongst other outlets, about why President Trump should pardon Roger Ver. And Aaron, I guess Mr. Ver decided that he needed to be to not be a citizen of the United States, and went through the legal process to make that a reality. And this tax issue came up that Tracy was just talking about there, where she appeared with Mr. Ver, who had his mouth taped and the word censored across his mouth on the Charlie Kirk show.
Fiasco that he had. He actually decided right when he got out of prison that he's no longer safe in the United States. So he began the process of trying to exit the United States in around 2001. And in fact, he moved to Japan originally in 2006. And he was having a hard time finding a place to land and expatriate, in part because of the conviction from the fireworks charge. And so it took him quite a period of time. So from basically 2006 until 2014 to ultimately land in St. Kitts. And then he went through the process of expatriation in 2014. And so when he did that, and as Tracy eloquently described in the clip before, he knew he was going to be targeted because of his previous experience. So he went out of his way to find the best lawyers and accountants and valuation firms to properly estimate the value of his Bitcoin so that he wouldn't be in the situation that he's in now. And for your viewers that aren't aware of what the crypto landscape was like in 2014, the IRS had not provided clear guidance on Bitcoin. It was unknown at the time if Bitcoin was a currency, if it was an asset. They didn't provide any clear guidance. In addition to that, there was really only one major exchange where you could buy and sell Bitcoin. It was called Mt. Gox, and Mt. Gox had had a major collapse and a major failure. So there was essentially no liquidity. There was no market to even be able to sell Bitcoin at that time. So had Roger sold all of his Bitcoin, it would have completely tanked the market. And so it's interesting when you look through this process, it seems like the government is trying to imply that he was evasive about his taxes. And then now at this point, Roger's lawyers a week or two ago filed a motion to dismiss this case, and they released publicly Roger's email communications with his lawyers and accountants that show very clearly and very explicitly that Roger was doing everything that he could to get the proper advice to be able to properly value his Bitcoin. And so it seems as though the case was, and even whatever evidence the state gave the grand jury was based on false information to begin with.
Wow. So they actually took all this communication between he and his attorneys and confiscated it, basically, when they raided their offices. And in that communication, he is on record saying we need to follow the law very explicitly and in a very detailed way.
So yes, they violated his rights. They violated his attorney-client privilege. And out of that came evidence showing Roger's innocence. And, you know, and the funny thing about this is this process now is 10 years old. This is for tax issues from 2014, so a decade ago, and then from 2017 when he wasn't even a citizen of the United States. I've never seen a more trumped up case than this. And it's interesting, when he was originally arrested and thrown into prison, I freaked out because I actually was fearful for his life given what had happened to John McAfee. But then when he got out on bail, I thought, you know what? This is just the IRS using dirty tactics to get him in a situation where, you know, he's away from home in a country where he doesn't even speak the language. They're using this as a negotiating tactic and to basically try to extort him, and that's, you know, probably in a few weeks he'll resolve this issue. And so a month goes by, 2 months go by, 3 months go by, and at no point in this process has the IRS told him how much he was supposed to have paid. There has been no offer of settlement. Roger literally has no idea, and his lawyers have even issued FOIA requests that have not been responded to or rejected to even try to find out what it is he's supposed to owe. Which during this process, I will point out, FTX was able to settle billions of dollars of tax liability for pennies on the dollar. So there's something about this particular situation that is political, and he is not being treated equally in any way, shape, or form. As far as I can tell, he's probably one of the only people that tried to pay taxes in 2014. And in the meanwhile, no one else is facing any type of criminal charge whatsoever, and he's not even given an opportunity to attempt to settle this. And so there's clearly something more at play here.
Well, I mean, it makes me wonder, is he an open Trump supporter? I mean, I didn't see anything in my research on the man. He's not out there wearing a red MAGA hat. He hasn't showed up at any rallies. As far as I know, Trump's never mentioned him to any at any length at all. But they sure are acting like he's a Trump supporter. But this goes way back. It's unfortunate Mr. Trump's team didn't have this model to look at so they could be predictive of exactly how he was going to be treated over the last 4 years. You know what?
Well, I mean, he wasn't a citizen of the United States, so I think he wasn't entering. He wasn't involved with United States politics at all. I think once he left and stopped being a United States citizen, he didn't weigh in one way or the other. But I think certainly now, you know, he's very. As I wrote in the article, I think the similarities between Trump and Roger are striking, and I think it would be an amazing conversation if Roger were to speak with Trump directly, because I think that they would find the commonalities to be impressive. I mean, Trump created this empire and, you know, went against the grain, pursued the truth. And what did he find at the end of this process? He was relentlessly and continuously audited and hounded by the IRS. Trump had his attorney-client privilege broached and breached with Michael Cohen. And it's the same thing. It's all politically motivated because Trump wanted to get to the truth and expose the truth. That's why they wanted to shut him down. And this is exactly why they wanted to shut Roger down, not only for his potential exposing of Bitcoin, but Roger has supported many anti-war causes, medical freedom causes. You know, he's been a supporter of Julian Assange and others. So he has been, and most of this has been kind of quiet and under the radar, but I suspect I suspect the other side knows, excuse me, the extent to his involvement in funding a large part of the freedom movement.
Yeah, it's really interesting, really interesting. We'll go through your list of identical natures of the way the two have been treated here. Hopefully in the next segment, what you laid out in the article. But goodness, these similarities, actually, they're exact. Quite frankly, they're really troubling, because it just tells me what I think I've known in my heart of hearts. Look, I'm a government guy. I spent from age 17 to 49 in the U.S. military. I didn't work in government after my military career, but you know, I've indoctrinated with believing that people make good decisions or try to have a good intention anyway. But this lawfare that's being practiced on Trump has been going on long before this, is what Roger's case tells me. And then there were probably more victims out there of that. And we know about things like the ATF's treatment of the Branch Davidians and those kind of incidents too. So we've got a lot of work to do to set things right. And I want to talk some more about that with you after this break here on the Rob Maness Show. We're talking with Aaron Day about the need for President Trump to pardon Roger Ver. And he's right. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at WVWFoundation.com. that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Whenever I see a story that says the U.S. government is extraditing somebody for tax evasion to put him in prison for 109 years, my first thought is maybe it's not really about the taxes. Maybe there's something more to this story. Could there be another reason the U.S. government is angry at you and wants to put you in prison for the rest of your life?
Yeah, to be honest, I think they're not really angry about taxes at all. I think they're just angry about my lack of obedience and lack of, kissing their ring. I was the first person in the entire world to start investing in the Bitcoin ecosystem and investing in businesses that made it easy for people to use Bitcoin as money and as cash for people all over the world. And I was promoting it since 2011 as, hey, stop using the US dollar, stop using euros, stop using yen, start using Bitcoin. We have an alternative in which each individual anywhere on the planet can be in charge of their own money completely without needing permission from any politician or any government anywhere in the world. And when you're a government that loves controlling people through the control of the money supply, that's very, very threatening to their control of the world. So, of course, they didn't like that at all. And I knew that this sort of thing was dangerous. And I thought the safest path for me would be to not be a U.S. citizen. So in 2014, I renounced my U.S. citizenship and became a citizen of the world effectively. But my new nationality is St. Kitts, which is a wonderful little island in the Caribbean. And I thought that would be safe for me. And I could promote Bitcoin from there and obey. Even though I may disagree with plenty of laws, I do my best to obey them because I know when you're advocating for things that change the world, governments don't like that and they can come after you. So I told all my tax attorneys and everybody else, we have to do everything perfect so that there's no room for the U.S. government to give me a hard time about any of this. And more than a decade after I had already renounced my U.S. citizenship, and just a couple of weeks after I published a book on the hijacking of Bitcoin, how it no longer works as peer-to-peer cash for the world, and it's been morphed into something that's just a digital asset that people are speculating on the price on, rather than something that can compete with the U.S. dollar and the euro and the yen for use as currency around the world. Suddenly, right after my book gets published that exposes how people claiming to work for intelligence agencies hijacked Bitcoin to do that, suddenly I get arrested and tossed in jail in Spain and trying to be extradited to face more than 100 years in prison. I'm 45 today. I think my odds of being alive with conventional technology in 109 years from now aren't looking too good. So effectively to die in prison is what they want because they're so upset about the things I've been saying and the way I've been promoting cryptocurrency around the world. As the founder of Bitcoin.com, co-founder of XRP and Blockchain.com and a bunch of other companies, I literally seeded the entire first generation of cryptocurrency companies. And so they're furious at me for trying to have something that can compete with the US dollar as the world's medium of exchange and currency.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're talking about the war on equal opportunity or equal treatment under the law. And the case of Roger Ver, that's who you just heard from there talking with Tucker Carlson on his show. And my guest today is Aaron Day. Aaron's an entrepreneur and an investor in his own right. And he wrote a great article about why President Trump should pardon Roger Ver that was published in the Stone Zone amongst many other outlets. And Aaron, he doesn't sound like a radical. He doesn't sound like an extremist. He doesn't sound like a man that set out to break the law and deserves to get 109 years in a federal prison and die in prison.
Well, he didn't set out to break the law, and he didn't break the law. That's the thing that's probably the most frustrating about this. I've never seen an example of somebody going overboard to the extent that he did to actually try to comply with the law. And that's what makes this frustrating, because it also makes it painfully obvious that they're trying to silence him. And it's had the right effect. His book came out in April. And, if you look at this in the Bitcoin world, I mean, people are now talking about, not only are you not using Bitcoin for day-to-day transactions, you're supposed to buy it through BlackRock, and you never even have it in your own possession. You're working through all of these different layers. And so just a few months after these ETFs take over, he puts out this book, this very powerful book. And I will tell you it's powerful because I did a very short tweet about it, recommending it, and I was blocked by all of these big Bitcoin maxis and all of the Bitcoin core developers just for writing a very short post saying, hey, you should check this thing out. And so I think if ever you find a situation where somebody's trying to censor something right away, there's probably truth in that, and you should probably go find out whatever information is trying to be suppressed. And so, he's been in Spain, out on bail, but he's been essentially gagged, and it actually took a lot of courage for him to do that Tucker interview. That's the only interview he's done. And from a lawfare perspective, the DOJ and the IRS, they're going to use everything that he said in that interview against him. They're going to call these extrajudiciary statements, and they're going to try everything that they can to use that against him. And so here you have a guy that's trying to expose the truth, and then locked away in a foreign country and sequestered in a foreign country with his freedom at risk, and he still speaks out. And he still tells the truth. The amazing thing is, if you look at what Roger said in that Tucker interview and you compare it to what he said when I first saw him in 2012, he's saying exactly the same things. It is amazing how principled he has remained and how steadfast he has been about the importance of providing alternative currency for the world.
Yeah, he's very, very consistent. In the article, you write about how Roger Ver is the embodiment of natural law. Now, we liberty-minded Americans most of us think we have a pretty good sense of what natural law is. What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I think I went on to explain a little bit further in that article, really the principles of voluntarism and kind of the non-aggression principle and not using violence. We certainly could go. I could go and talk about natural law a variety of ways and bring up the Hermetic principles, but in the article I went and wanted to make it more specific to, I think, the way Roger describes it and lives it, which is really around the idea of voluntarism.
Yeah, it's very interesting what's being done to him. And we've got some questions over in the live audience that I want to take since we've got the time here. Shell is our host over there. Go ahead, Shell, with that first question.
We have Roger, sir.
Oh, okay. I thought it was Sofa King first, but now I think I know the answer.
Just the question.
Yeah, hang on. Oh, God. All right. As a DA or a cop can lie to a person being questioned, can they do the same for a grand jury?
What was that? I didn't catch that.
Was it as a DA or a cop can lie to a person they're being questioned, can they do the same for a grand jury? Is that correct, Roger?
Yes, sir.
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I don't have full insight into the grand jury process. That is a good question to ask.
It is a great question, and I'm not a court expert on the grand jury system either, so I can't answer it. Let's go ahead and take that other question from Sofa King, Shell.
Go ahead, Sofa.
Thank you, Shell. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Aaron. I know this whole thing is about government control. Does there exist any of these other crypto coins that are popping up everywhere? Almost every other day there's a new crypto coin that are have suspicions of being government owned or operated platforms.
So it's interesting. There are two parts to this. So there's the part of them wanting to suppress hijacking Bitcoin, but then just 3 days before he was arrested, Roger was speaking about a privacy cryptocurrency called Zano, Z-A-N-O. And this is a cryptocurrency that is, unlike Bitcoin, not something that the government can track all of the transactions and figure out everyone's transaction history and who's buying what. This is a completely private cryptocurrency that also allows you to create what are called privacy tokens so that you can actually make other assets private. So for instance, you can even use Xano to make Bitcoin private or Ethereum private, or you could create a token that is backed by gold that has, privacy features to it. So, in my opinion, the timing of going after Roger is that Roger hadn't been as public as he had been for quite some time, for quite a number of years. And then all of a sudden, he was not only beginning this book tour, but he was also beginning to speak publicly about new cryptocurrencies that could serve the original vision and the reason that he got involved in Bitcoin to begin with, which is cryptocurrency that could be used by anyone, anywhere in the world, without government oversight and now without government tracking. So I believe that, and he talked about it in the Tucker interview, Xano and Monero are two that I know he has talked highly about. And in fact, he introduced me to Xano and actually reached out to me after he was out on bail. And he knew what I had been doing in terms of promoting solutions to CBDCs. And he said, hey, listen, you really need to look at Xano. And I did. And I read the white paper and met with the team, and I've talked to the developers, and I've been using it. And, he, as usual, he was onto something. And I think this is what's next. This is an ongoing battle. And what we are fighting now are CBDCs. And this technology seems to be something that could be a real threat. And my guess is they know how effective Roger is at network effects. When Roger gets behind something, they tend to turn out to be the most popular cryptocurrencies in the world, and he has a network all over the world. So I think it's to suppress the truth about Bitcoin and suppress the dissemination of cryptocurrencies like Xano and Monero.
So just for the audience's sake, Aaron, Bitcoin and CBDC, if Bitcoin can be tracked by the government, and all of its transactions can be tracked and who does it and those kind of things, why would the government need a CBDC?
Bitcoin is too slow and expensive to use. So the reason Bitcoin was problematic wasn't necessarily that it could be tracked. It's that it can't handle many transactions. So when Roger talks about the hijacking of Bitcoin, what many people don't know is that by 2017, Bitcoin was becoming very popular as a cryptocurrency to be used in daily commerce. There were major retailers like Overstock.com, Microsoft, and Expedia that started to take Bitcoin directly. So people were starting to use it for its original case. And then there was this artificial limit that was put, it's called the block size, artificial limit that basically capped the number of transactions that Bitcoin can do to 7 transactions per second. This wasn't the original design. The original design by the anonymous creator Satoshi Nakamoto was that Bitcoin was supposed to be able to compete with Visa and MasterCard right out of the gates. And so people all of a sudden, with this hijack narrative, all of a sudden people came in and said, well, you know what, it's not supposed to be cash anymore. We're going to keep this 7 transactions per second in place. And so when that happened, the average transaction fee surged to $50, and it took about 10 days for a transaction to complete. Well, when that happened, obviously, Microsoft, Expedia, Overstock, and others said, we can't be in business if we're going to pay $50 in fees and have to wait 10 days to get paid. And so it stopped entirely the use case. And so it's, for the same reasons, nothing has changed in that regard. Bitcoin is still stuck at 7 transactions per second. So it couldn't be used as a CBDC. But in the book that I wrote, The Final Countdown, I picked up on where hijacking Bitcoin left off. And what I found is that the group out of MIT that funded making these tweaks and changes to make Bitcoin slow and expensive digital gold also funded all 3 US CBDC pilots. And so their US CBDC pilot can do 1.8 million transactions per second versus Bitcoin being stuck at 7. And to add one other layer to this, there's actually a Bitcoin developer that ended up working on and is a co-author of Project Hamilton, which is the US retail CBDC pilot project.
Wow. Well, we got to take our last break, Aaron. When we come back, though, I want to dive a little bit more into the intelligence agency's play in this hijacking effort, and I think Roger has talked about that a little bit. But it's very, very, very interesting that maybe the CIA is the one that did the hijacking of Bitcoin. We'll be right back with more War Monday and Aaron Day talking about President Trump's need to pardon Roger Ver.
And so then we fast forward more than a decade later there, Bitcoin came along. And so I thought, oh, this is every libertarian's dream come true. Suddenly now we're going to have a choice. And I'm not against the US dollar or the yen or the euro. I'm pro-choice. I think people should be able to choose what form of money they want to use. And whether it's the dollar, the euro, or the yen, or Bitcoin, or some other cryptocurrency out there, I think people deserve the right to have that choice and learn about it, because there's just so many posts saying, buy, sell, oh no, and just saying nothing of any substance whatsoever. So somebody out there literally made the forum unusable as early as 2011. And around that same time, we already know that the CIA was interested in Bitcoin because they were asking different Bitcoin developers to, hey, can you explain Bitcoin to us? So way back when the vast majority of the world hadn't even heard of Bitcoin yet, the CIA was looking into it, and somebody was actively preventing it from spreading as quickly as it otherwise could have by shutting down the forum effectively when so many new people were coming to Bitcoin to learn about it for the first time. But then later, in, I believe, 2012, a person using the name John Dillon, who claimed to work for intelligence, spent more than $10,000, I forget the exact amount, but a significant sum of money to start producing propaganda to trick people into thinking that by keeping the blocks on Bitcoin small, it would make it more decentralized. And literally the exact opposite of the truth, the exact opposite of the way Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin, designed it and promoted it, and the exact opposite of the way that people were using it. And nobody believed the propaganda initially. But then later, this giant wave of censorship took place. Anonymous people that nobody knows their real names managed to get control of all the main discussion platforms for Bitcoin. And then suddenly, one day overnight, nobody was even allowed to advocate for Bitcoin being used as money. And they censored anybody that tried to do that. And initially, everybody saw through it. But then everybody that came to Bitcoin after the censorship began, they just started believing it. And today, the main people that are out there promoting Bitcoin, they literally say, oh, Bitcoin shouldn't compete with the US dollar. Bitcoin, you shouldn't use it as money. You shouldn't use it to pay for things. Like Bitcoin is just a digital asset. You should just hold it. And it's the exact opposite. They've through the censorship and the propaganda, they've literally hijacked Bitcoin.
Welcome back to the Rob Mader Show. It's More War Monday, and we're talking about the war on equal treatment under the law and all of the major government apparatus that is doing everything it can to keep cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin from being used like the dollar or the yen or the euro. And my guest today is Aaron Day, an entrepreneur, investor, and Brownstone Institute fellow who has written a great article. Yeah, you got to go check it out at the Stone Zone. It's about why President Trump should pardon Roger Ver and how important it is. And Aaron, that was Roger himself back on the Tucker Carlson show talking about the intelligence agencies, the CIA, and this other pseudonym guy using, that said he was from the intelligence agencies and why they were interested in it. Well, of course, U.S. intelligence would be interested in it, and they would have a stake in stopping cryptocurrency from being used like the U.S. dollar, wouldn't they?
They absolutely would. And I don't know if Roger outlined this in his book, but it's well known that the developer, that Satoshi Nakamoto, handed the keys over to a guy named Gavin Andresen, actually did meet with the CIA. The CIA reached out to him, and I guess he made a presentation to the CIA, and that was right about the last time anybody heard from Satoshi Nakamoto, was when that had taken place. So the CIA took very early interest in whatever, I'm going to say 2010, 2011 timeframe. Then this John Dillon character comes onto the scene, and we don't really know who he is. We just know from his communications that he stated in his communications that he was with the intelligence community. We don't know which branch or have any specifics about that, but we do know that he was very dead set against Bitcoin being used as currency. He wanted to shape the Bitcoin as a digital gold narrative, and he even funded one of the developers, this guy named Peter Todd. He funded Peter Todd implementing something called replace by fee. But the best way that I can describe it is he funded the creation of basically a cap and trade system within Bitcoin. That's really what they did to Bitcoin. Instead of Bitcoin being something that can process millions of transactions and that is market-based and scales, they just like they do with carbon, they created an artificial market where they kept the block size small so you can only do so many transactions. And so now that you can only do this small number of transactions, now you have to bid up. If you want to get your transaction done, now you have to pay $50, $100, $1,000, whatever it is. And so essentially it's a cap and trade type system. And this guy Dillon funded the trade component of the cap and trade system. And so it's really undisputed in this book. I mean, that you can't really deny that actually did happen.
Yeah, and it just gets more and more damning as we dig into this story. Do you think that they may be behind Beers being stuck in Spain now and going to the same prison where McAfee was? Do they have that much power to be able to pull strings like that? Well, and how did Roger end up in Spain if he's a St. Kitts citizen? Why did he end up there?
Well, I would say this. Who else would actually have the power to do that other than the intelligence community? I mean, the IRS isn't in the normal business. I mean, when do you hear about this type of thing happening with the IRS? This had to be planned. You had to work in advance. You had to be tracking Roger's schedule. You had to know where he was going to be, and then you had to actually get the cooperation of the Spanish authorities, and you had to be able to do this in a very short, narrow window of time where Roger happened to be in Spain. I will say this. So I was arranged when I had interviewed him. I told you I interviewed him about his book, and when I was scheduling the interview, he was somewhere in Asia, and then he was in the UAE. He spoke at this big cryptocurrency conference in the UAE where he started talking about privacy coins. And then he wasn't even speaking, as I understand it, at this conference in Spain. So it's not that he was like there was a website advertising, oh, hey, Roger Vere's coming to Spain. So whatever it was coordinated here, it had to have knowledge of him basically vacationing in Spain in this short window of time. Well, who other than an intelligence agency could actually coordinate that kind of thing? So to me, and again, you add on top of that the fact that it hasn't been the normal IRS process. There hasn't been this, usually you get here's a statement in the mail, you owe penalties and interest, and here's the statement, right? Mm-hmm. None of that. Yeah. This has been just immediately, do not pass go. This is criminal. We're not going to negotiate with you. We're going to extradite you, and it's 109 years. So I guess the question is, who else could it be other than the intelligence agencies pushing this?
That is a great way to put it, because it can't be very many entities that have that type of information and that type of power at all, as a matter of fact. And my audience knows I'm not one to buy into conspiracy theories, but I am one to look at the facts and use logic and come to the appropriate conclusion. And I think you're right. You wrote about in the article how the playbook of persecution for Donald Trump and Roger Ver are the same. Step us through that as we get to the end of the show, and then I want to talk about how we can help Roger.
Well, I mean, I think it's the same. So what was Roger trying to do? Roger's goal was, again, he's not a U.S. citizen. He's been not a U.S. citizen for 10 months, and so he's just on the verge of essentially reemerging in the public sphere to expose the truth about Bitcoin and to propose an alternative. Well, what is Trump doing? I mean, all of the lawfare against Trump was waged to stop him from getting reelected and to stop him from reemerging on the stage and basically draining the swamp and continuing to push the MAGA agenda. I mean, it's actually a complete overlap. So this is one of these things where they're looking out in advance and saying, well, we don't like what Trump might do. Trump might actually dismantle the deep state. Trump might push on these other things. They're looking at Roger and saying, hey, he might expose the fact, because we have all these people now excited about Bitcoin, and people are calling their broker and everything else, and they're buying these messages that this is the way out of of this mess. And now all of a sudden we're in this situation where people are talking about using taxpayer money to sell gold, to buy Bitcoin and everything else. This is so counter to what Bitcoin was supposed to be about. And it's such a hijacked narrative, but yet the people behind it, the Federal Reserve loves it, the banks love it, BlackRock loves it, and so the last thing you want is Roger out there talking about this book, because this book is just filled with facts. I encourage everybody to read this book. There are 287 citations in this book. I have yet to find anybody put forward a compelling argument, and in fact, before he was arrested, Roger had put out, he and another friend of his had put out a $500,000 reward to go to the charity of the winner's choice, or actually a charity to the person's choice. This guy, Adam Back, who was one of the earlier developers, he offered $500,000 to go to a charity of Adam's choice to debate the information in this book. And it was rejected. And Adam Back blocked me. He's blocked others. These people do not want this information getting out, just in the same way they don't want Trump going in and unraveling everything Trump has said he's going to unravel in terms of, all right, we're going to know about the Epstein list. We're going to know about JFK. Right. He's going to break open all of this information. And so in that respect, it's the parallel. But also, Roger was starting to talk about solutions, and not only exposing the problem, but coming up with solutions. Well, look at what Trump is doing. Look at what Trump is doing with bringing on Doge. I mean, and clearly bringing on this entire different team to just clean house and get things done in a way that is a threat to the status quo. It's exactly what Roger threatens to do by exposing Bitcoin and promoting alternatives.
Yeah, and I got to mention that Trump's come out opposed to CBDCs. Says they're a big danger, if not the biggest danger to the United States of America. And folks, centralized banking is why we have $36 trillion in national debt in the United States. It's why we continue to get away with sending billions of dollars to Ukraine and continuing that meat grinder over there when it's totally not necessary to continue it. It's how we are controlled in everything, and it controls digital or centralized banking creates inflation. The Fed, all of that is a result of this, and cryptocurrency in the vision of Roger Ver could bring all that tumbling down. Aaron, and tell folks where they can sign the petition. I think you guys are within about almost 5,000 signatures of your goal on the petition, and what else we can do to help.
Yeah, go to freerogernow.org and sign the open letter. And I'll tell you, these signatures help. If you're sitting there saying, oh, this doesn't matter. I mean, this is Ross Ulbricht. President Trump agreed. I was actually there at the Libertarian Party convention to commute Ross Ulbricht's sentence. And a large part of that was because they were able to collect hundreds of thousands of signatures over the years. So every signature matters. And so visit freerogernow.org and sign the open letter and share that link with people. Share it on social media, but also send it to people individually, because these social media sites don't like external links. So send it by SMS or whatever it happens to be. And then share as much when you see content. Share the Tucker Carlson interview. Share this interview. Just share the information you need. Read the book, because again, this is the more I have yet to find somebody that read the book. Even people that were on the other side of it, the best case scenario is like, well, yeah, he makes a lot of good points. This is true, but we are where we are anyway, so let's just stick the course. But no one has refuted this. People have rejected $500,000 in donations to charity to debate this. So let's get that truth out there.
Aaron Day, folks of the Brownstone Institute, Brownstone Fellow, talking about pardoning Roger Ver and why President Trump needs to do it. Tomorrow's Transition Tuesday, we'll have a member of that list, the rank and file proposed list, to be appointed by the president in the Department of Defense to talk with us tomorrow. I'll see you then on the Rob Maness Show.